In 901, and the situation is changing dramatically still. See what happened. One of the first things that happened was the Burgundian king died heirless, and now there's some Count of Aquitaine or whatever claiming the throne. He has no claims anywhere. He just owns Aquitaine in Brittany. This is what can happen if most of your kingdom has been conquered. You can't come back and take it back easily once you lose those claims. I mean, physically, a good leader can take things, but now that area is all open and was supposedly free for the French. But the Germans went before the French, and they used their huge quantity, perceived advantage in money. Now, they've actually drained their treasury compared to the French treasury, so this may swing the other way if the leadership balance remains. First, they attacked Burgundy and got rid of those pesky tactical systems by taking it. It was defended. Then they moved on, took Flanders and Anjou. Now, if they can wipe out those three remaining northern French areas, the French player is no longer really in the game, even though he has territories elsewhere. What else do we see? Well, the Scots and the Poles both kind of solidified their territories, getting claims, improving the economic situation. And the Byzantines went and took Kiev, and were hoping to convert it, but somebody died, and now they're left with somebody who's unable to really do that kind of job. So they'll probably go back to administrative tasks, although maybe they might throw money into Kiev. They make 17 gold a turn, which is humongous, but they've been spending at least that much on their conversion opportunities. So we'll see what happens. 906 and more exciting actions. The Byzantines, I think, kind of started things off. They had a leader die as heirless. They lost Serbia to that, along with Anatolia, Volhynia, and Kiev. They regained Serbia through diplomatic means. Their new leader is actually quite good, after a little bit of turmoil. Let's see what else happened of excitement. The Poles also had a leader died heirless and ended up with a fantastic military leader with which they conquered Volhynia. The Scots are actually, those aren't Poles, those are Bohemians, and have been all along. The Scots, they're just such a hosed area. But let's go to the main event, which has been the three-sided war now. Well, it's really two-sided, with Germany and the Count of Aquitaine, who kind of vaguely is claiming other titles, but has no chance right now of making them good, at war with the lately excommunicated King of France. The Count of Aquitaine actually started things off, I believe, and conquered Toulouse, and he conquered Normandy. The French, or the Germans, continued, not sure what they had already. I believe they had Anjou at the point. They conquered Flanders, but a dynastic, the first thing that had to happen was the French had to appeal their excommunication. They went to the Pope and said, "Hey, can you forgive me?" And because of the situation, not everyone's as opposed to the French being Catholic anymore. So the important person to vote in their favor were the Byzantines with their 9 big votes. It worked out that they had a slight edge, and so France was readmitted. And then the same basic voting bloc, which would be, I think the Poles were in favor as well of the French. Same basic voting bloc granted a dynastic inheritance which consisted of, it's a multiple area one, it consisted of Flanders, Normandy, and Anjou, all fell back to the French. So, all the efforts of this turn and some of last turn got reversed, and then the French continued on and attacked Aquitaine, knocking the Count out of his territory, and now he's down in Toulouse, which he recently captured, trying to survive there. Brittany actually should be on unrest because it's no longer connected to his kingdom. And I think that's about where we are. So long as, so the Germans ran out of money basically in their attacks, which has put the French able to undertake operations. Now, Aquitaine still has a pretty decent pile of money, which they could use to help fund operations by Germany or whatever. But right now, they're in a pretty piss poor position where they may be losing. They may be being knocked out again. It keeps sort of shifting between who's going to get knocked out and how long that'll last, because obviously Burgundy was knocked out for a while but came back. All right. 9/11 and the fun continues. Well, the Aquitaine Count didn't feel like he could do a lot. So he held on to most of his cards to try to defend himself because he looked like the apt target for any kind of French assault, just because knocking out one of two players gets rid of a lot of the offensive cards that might be played. Likewise, the Germans, with their crappy leader, didn't want to play a lot of cards, but they did play. But they didn't have a lot of value to the defense on them. So instead of holding a bunch of cards because they didn't have the money, they built up fortifications. They improved, I believe, Bavaria and failed in Franconia. And they increased their tax base. So when things swung around to the French player, a horrible card came out. An outbreak of heresy. And targeted Champagne, which if they had let go by, would have destroyed, would have taken Normandy and Ile-de-France as well. So they absolutely had to conquer it. And by the time they took that, they were nearly, their card limit was low enough that there wasn't anybody they could attack with any real effectiveness. They could have certainly attacked the Germans. What they did instead was some raiding or pillaging against both Toulouse and against Lorraine, actually against Friesland. The latter failed. But they got some extra cash that way because they're really, really cash poor at this point. Anjou, they have a total of 3 value that's at all taxable. And it's just problematic. Over on the eastern side, the Poles built Volhynia up so that they could go take Kiev, and then the Byzantines went and grabbed it before them. So there may actually be some dispute there. Clearly, the Polish leader is better militarily, and probably across the board, especially now when we have a weaker Byzantine leader having taken place. That's about it. 926, almost nothing's happened. The Byzantines did succeed in converting Kiev, and actually the Bohemians, Poles, whatever, attacked them there and failed. But the big event over here, obviously, the Scots aren't going anywhere unless they attack the French, and that hasn't been happening. The French have always had cards before the French have been going beyond, after the Scots. The way the game works is your leader statures, whoever has the highest amount gets to pick where they go in the turn. And in general, it's best to go late. The only exception to that is if you're out of money and you don't have a chance to defend yourself, in which case you may want to go earlier. But the real problem is, although they have no income, the Aquitanians, who are in Toulouse now, have enough money that if they hold all their cards, they can make life kind of miserable on any attack against them. So the French have kind of not wanted to attack them there. May be a bad idea. They may want to just try to burn through it and finally wipe them out. The Germans, they'd be attackable. They also have money and held cards, though. And it just seemed like it would be cheaper each turn to try doing other things. But I think when you have a war leader, you have to fight, even if the Bohemians haven't been really following that advice. The year is 921. So what happened of interest? Well, the Scots started things off on the right foot by attacking the French and captured Northumbria, and actually got claim to it through the play of a recognition of claim card. Next move was the Aquitanians, who really didn't do anything, and then when the French came, they spent their first couple cards removing the Aquitanians from the board, essentially. So Toulouse is now gone, and the Count is over in Constantinople, hoping to try to resurrect his position. The Germans, the Byzantines, I don't know what they did. They ruled. They have a good ruler. The Germans also held on to a lot of cards and did some ruling. Now, Lorraine is not at +3, it's at -3, and I'll explain that in a moment. But they did manage to get a somewhat better leader than they had. Over on the French side, not only did they take Toulouse, but then because they couldn't really wipe Germany out on this turn, they made the decision to raid and grab themselves a little bit more cash. They still don't have much. Funding levels have gone way down at this point. In order to get, they raided Lorraine for that. And finally the Poles advanced, or the Bohemians advanced into Kiev, as well as handling an epidemic which struck them. As we can see, the money situation's changed completely in the bank.